Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 695 through 697, which will cover manga chapters 756 through 758. And yes, I have been waiting to talk about this set of episodes for a while now. And yeah, Sugar is back and threatening Luffy and Law, but a godly ally will come to his aid in an epic fashion. Oh, this episode is so good for Usopp, and probably one of his finest moments. But yeah, so synopsis. Rebecca finds herself all alone in the flower garden, trying to survive against Diamante until help can arrive. Meanwhile, Usopp and the others must make an impossible sniper shot to save Luffy and Law from the resurrected Sugar. Alrighty, so differences. Thankfully, there aren't as many differences in this set of episodes. It's more so that they just elongate all of the key scenes in this set of episodes, more so than adding scenes in there. But there are still a decent number of differences. So the first one is when Luffy begins to climb Bartolomeo's stairs. In the anime, it cuts away to show more fighting between Fujitora and Sabo. Much of this scene is in the manga later on, but it never cuts away here. One thing about this scene, though, is in the anime is that it adds a bit more dialogue at the beginning that is filler in the anime, and it makes it super obvious that Fujitora is definitely not trying and hoping that the people, and perhaps even the Straw Hats, are able to defeat Doflamingo without his or the Marines' intervention. And I mentioned you can figure this out from the clues prior, but here it pretty much beats you over the head with it by having Sabo pretty much tell you, and by you, I mean the reader or the viewer, directly, whereas the manga is a lot more subtle about it. Well, I guess it's not subtle, but it doesn't actually directly tell you. Whereas there's a lot of very obvious hints in the manga that hints that Fujitora is not trying to help and defeat Doflamingo, but he's also not trying to defeat the people that are. So he's not actively trying to defeat Sabo. He's not trying to actively get in the way of Luffy and all the other gladiators that are trying to defeat Doflamingo. He's just kind of there to look like he's doing something, but he's not. It's funny seeing his subordinates confused as to like what is happening. I do like those little additions in the anime. Another change is the anime extends Rebecca trying to fend off Diamante a bit more, while the manga jumps in where Rebecca tries to run from him in the cover of the sunflowers, and then the moment where Diamante slashes her in the back. That's pretty much the first scene you get to see of that scene, whereas everything prior to that, which is probably about like 2.5 to 3 minutes worth of footage of her trying to get away and Diamante kind of like egging her on, that's all filler in the anime. Another change is the scene where Sugar approaches Luffy and Law. This is also a little bit longer, as in the manga, they only show Sugar approaching the two saying, "Who's that kid?" instead of having a full-blown conversation with them while she pretends to cry and be a lost child. This filler scene is kind of problematic because the way it's presented in the anime, you kind of wonder why they, if they let her get this close to them for this long, why didn't she just reach out and touch both of them right then and there? In the manga, it's much more ambiguous what the actual situation was or how long it took Sugar to reach them, as it cuts back to Usopp's perspective for the rest of the scene. So you only see the little tiny silhouettes of them in the distance. And so, yeah, you don't really get a sense of what's actually happening with the three of them. But in the anime, it makes it so clear that they're just like standing feet from her, just having a conversation with their guard down. And then you just wonder, like, why doesn't Sugar just immediately reach out and touch them? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Lastly, during Usopp's sort of wind up to try and hit his shot, the anime adds this extra sort of not hallucination, but just an image of Usopp hesitating, and then he imagines himself missing the shot, which I guess adds a little bit more tension because it's a fake out, but it seems really dumb. And so, yeah, the manga obviously doesn't have this. It just has him concentrating and then having that sort of internal monologue to himself, and then he fires, and that the moment he fires, that's the real shot. So those are kind of the big differences. So let's get into the episodes themselves. Like we left off in the last set of episodes, Rebecca makes it to the 4th level into the flower garden, and this scene is for some reason given a lot of time and effort as the animation quality is noticeably better. I'm not sure why this scene got so much put into it, but it looks beautiful despite how short it is, even with the blatant sort of fan service shot, which is unnecessary. But yeah, Leo and Kabu make their way to Manchuri, leaving Rebecca alone thinking she'll be fine waiting for Luffy. But it turns out this was a grave mistake, as it's soon revealed that Diamante of all people was hiding, sleeping in the sunflowers for some reason. And back down on the 3rd level, Bartolomeo assists in Luffy's effort to move past Gladius and the Nutcrackers and comes up with a really creative use of his barriers, as he constructs stairs out of them, allowing a direct path to the 4th level. And again, I love how much more exaggerated Bartolomeo's reaction to Luffy is. Like, the way Toei adds this stuff is so funny. When Bartolomeo reacts to Luffy saying thank you, and they go the extra mile of him seeing the sunrise and sobbing, while in the manga he just gets this one tiny panel of him saying, not at all, I'm the one who should be thanking you for being born. And I get it, you know, Bartolomeo, like, I really get it. I feel the exact same way about Luffy and Eiichiro Oda. Like, you completely, like, fall into sort of understanding Bartolomeo if you're like a real fan of One Piece, because you understand exactly how he's feeling. But anyways, as Luffy makes his way up the stairs, Gladius continues to launch his punk bullets, which Luffy can't deflect since they explode on impact, as stated by Bartolomeo. So in order to protect his idol, he jumps in front of them, taking all the explosions without his barriers, as he's currently using all his barriers to make the stairs. Now that is dedication, and I love this character so much. But Cavendish also continues to show that he's a pretty cool guy, as he commits to fighting alongside and protecting Bartolomeo for as long as he has the barrier stairs up. And again, yeah, Cavendish and Bartolomeo are becoming like a very interesting duo because they've clearly separated themselves from the other gladiators. Like, these two are definitely more important and have gotten much more time to shine than the other two. And so, yeah, I really like that they're now paired up almost like a duo. And it's really cool to see that, because they're so different. They're not even any remotely like each other. And this is where we get that awesome Robin moment, though, that I was talking about at the end of the last podcast episode, as Robin shares in Bartolomeo's feelings of putting all of their faith in Luffy. Of course, Robin knows his feeling all too well. Even though it's becoming cliche, I don't care. Bravo to Toei for setting this Robin speech to the iconic Overtaken soundtrack. Robin explains to them that Luffy is someone more than worth it to put their faith and lives in, and will always be the ace up their sleeve to victory. And I love that in quick succession we get 2 iconic scenes of the Straw Hat members showing their faith and dedication to Luffy, as well as you could even argue that Zoro acknowledging that both Luffy and Usopp are the big shots in the crew during his monologue also counts as well. But you see all of them sharing why Luffy and the Straw Hats are worth believing in. And I love these moments because, yeah, it really shows something special about how Oda has built up these characters and how the world sees them. And you immediately relate to it because you're also part of that, of people who believe in Luffy and the Straw Hats, and you feel instantly connected to them. And having Bartolomeo be there also makes it even more sort of tangible that, yeah, we're a part of this too. And I love that feeling, because in each moment it becomes infectious to all the other people around them that they start to believe in Luffy too. And that has been a pretty big theme of the post-time skip era in all 3 of the major arcs so far. In Fishman Island, Pug Hazard, and now Dressrosa, they all feature a group of people learning about Luffy and the Straw Hats and beginning to believe that they are a beacon of hope that they can believe in to help them. During all this, Rebecca is desperately trying to survive against Diamante, but is no match for him. And this guy is just so slimy and detestable. And that's saying something when there's someone who is literally slimy and detestable on the same crew in trouble. He's just toying with Rebecca in the cruelest way possible, psychologically torturing her by constantly reminding her about her murder and how he murdered her father. And I think one thing you kind of forget because of Rebecca's design is that she's only a kid. Like, she's 16 years old right now. She shouldn't be expected to be able to take on someone like Diamante, especially when she doesn't even desire to fight. Luckily, though, just in the nick of time, Kuros, her father, shows up to land a satisfying blow on Diamante. And this was a fateful matchup between the two that's been built up for a while. And I guess just to take a weird tangent off of this, I remember at the time and shortly after the conclusion of the Dressrosa arc, like a small portion of people had started to think that Oda was making Dressrosa up as he goes, and that a lot of things changed, and that there were things that he never intended, like having half the crew leave because of the awkward pacing and the drawn out nature of Dressrosa. But I don't believe this to be true, and this moment between Diamante and Kuros is one of the big reasons why I never did. Now, I'm not one of those people who like just simps over Oda and says like, oh, he's a god that has everything planned out and foreshadowed decades in advance, because we know that's not true either. But I do think Oda has a general outline of what should happen in each arc before he starts it. And I think he does give himself leeway to change things, obviously. And I think to have one of the strongest members of the Don Quixote pirates be taken on by Kuros, it seems weird if the plan was to keep Sanji on the island. Because then who would you have Sanji fight if you gave Pika to Zoro? So there are many other pieces of the story that point to the opposite as well. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention that because I know that that was somewhat of a talking point during Dressrosa in its original run, was that the reason why Dressrosa was so messy was because all of a sudden Oda just derailed like his original plan or something, which I don't see enough evidence to see that that was the case. I'm sure he changed a few things for sure, but I don't know that it was like a major overhaul that's what caused Dressrosa to kind of deviate into this like craziness. But I don't even think Dressrosa is all that bad. I do think Dressrosa is probably one of the more messier arcs in terms of the storytelling and pacing, because I think this is, as you've noticed, this is sort of the first of its kind in the story, this sort of major, like long, sprawling arc that has well over a dozen characters and a dozen different storylines that have to be followed, that all converge. And so, unlike now, I don't know that Oda has done anything on this scale in any of the arcs, to be quite frank. Like, it's just never been done. And so I think Oda was still playing around with a lot of things and trying to figure out how to do this. And you see him get better at this in the next, I guess not in the next arc, but in the next major arc. But then he kind of falls into that trap again with the arc after that. But yeah, I don't really see Dressrosa as something that went like derailed because Oda decided to change a lot of things just ad hoc. Nonetheless, I was really hyped to see Kuros take on Diamante for a number of reasons. One, to just see Kuros in a real fight in his human form, as he'd been hyped up to be this incredibly strong warrior this entire arc, and now we get to see him tested against a real opponent. My one complaint about this fight is that I don't think we got enough emotional investment in hating Diamante enough. Usually Oda is really good at this, because by this point we as the reader or viewer are seething with disdain for these types of villains, but I feel like Oda didn't or couldn't devote enough time to flesh out this dynamic between Rebecca, Scarlet, Kuros, and Diamante. And I get that Diamante is like only the third most significant member in the crew, and much of that time rightfully went to building up our hatred for Doflamingo. But Oda is usually so good at making us hate the villains, and I just didn't quite get that with Diamante by the time we got to this point. And again, I think that's an unfortunate effect of having to juggle so many characters and plots that there just isn't enough time without dragging the story out even more so than it already was. Nonetheless, this is still a great fight with plenty of emotional weight. And not only that, but this specific episode 696, they went out of their way to animate really well with fluid motion in this fight, not only between Kuros and Diamante, but also when Luffy and Law finally make it up to the flower garden as well, with Luffy dodging the nutcrackers just before getting the key from Rebecca. And what a great moment as the pair get eaten up by the nutcracker just as they get the key and Law finally gets his sea stone cuffs off and then amputates the Nutcracker with ease. Such a good moment. As Luffy and Law are now ready to take on Doflamingo, Rebecca stops to ask him if he's really going to defeat Doflamingo, and instead of saying just yes, he instead responds in the most epic way possible, first correcting her that his name isn't Lucy, but that he's Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. And I love the way he answers Rebecca's question here. He doesn't answer it directly saying he will defeat Doflamingo, but instead he treats it like a given and doesn't even acknowledge Doflamingo, as if to say that his ambitions lie so much higher in becoming the Pirate King that it's assumed that of course he's going to beat Doflamingo. And if that doesn't instill confidence in someone, I don't know what will. Like, it's almost like beating Doflamingo is an afterthought to getting the One Piece and becoming the Pirate King. Anyways, Luffy and Law make it past Diamante thanks to the Ope Ope fruit. Then we see Law actually use the fruit for its intended purpose and operates on himself by removing the bullets from his body, which is pretty cool. And you kind of forget that he had bullets lodged in him up until now. It's like now you understand why he was in such a cranky mood the whole time, basically being thrown around like a sack of potatoes by Luffy, as well as riding on Ushi and Faro. No wonder he mentions how it was more comfortable riding Ushi instead of Faro. He's been in excruciating pain with like 3 bullets lodged in his torso this entire time. Like, of course he's going to be pissed off and grumpy. But now we get to the good stuff, as Law and Luffy argue over how to proceed next, and an incredibly vengeful Sugar is slowly approaching them without them fully understanding Sugar's ability. Although you might be wondering why Law doesn't know Sugar's ability or who she is, but the reason for this is revealed later on, as well as supplemented by an answer in the SBS. However, I'm not going to mention why because technically it might be a spoiler, so I'll just say it makes sense why Law doesn't know Sugar. However, they have the GOAT, or I guess I should say the God, on their side, looking out for them, as Usopp, with the help of Kanjuro, who drew some sort of a special ammunition for him, and the ultimate sniper spotter in Viola, prepare to snipe Sugar from an insane distance to save Luffy from her. This moment is one of my favorites in the entire series, and probably one of Usopp's best moments in the entire series, if not the best. Like, there's so much tension and suspense built into this moment, as Sugar could potentially derail or even stop the whole plan altogether. Their stakes are never higher than ever. Then you also got the ticking clock of the Dressrosa citizens closing in fast to stop Usopp. And on this end, while everybody works together to give Usopp the tools and the time to accomplish something only he could do. And the fact that it's Usopp doing this critical role is also such an amazing aspect to why this scene is so hype for me too. It is a great demonstration of why Usopp is so critical to the crew, despite being the physically weakest on the crew. And I freaking love this. This is all based on the lead up to. It gets even better as the scene progresses, if you can believe it. Like, watching this moment, you realize just how insanely skilled of a sniper he really is, as he's literally shooting based on an image he has in his head, based on Viola's descriptions. But then something I did not expect develops, something so incredibly epic and just makes perfect sense for his character happens, as just before he commits to shooting, Usopp unlocks observation haki. He can see their essences, and I can't tell you how freaking crazy I went for this moment when I first read this. Usopp has haki. Usopp with observation haki would be so unstoppable when it comes to long-range sniping, and it makes so much sense for him. With that new level of senses, he can now confidently fire the super grow-up Black Kabuto bagworm just before the people get to him. And this whole sequence is some of Oda's best work on Usopp. How he has him explaining in his head and to us what actually went into the design and function of the bagworm shot, as it has 2 separate boosters that are set to fire at precise moments to propel it forward even more. And I love that he uses his normal gunpowder stars for it too. Then the big finisher is not a shot that's intended to shoot her directly, but Usopp uses one of his best weapons, psychological damage. Just like with Perona, he traumatizes Sugar with the thing that terrified her to begin with, and it's revealed what Usopp had Kanjuro draw for him to be the primary ammunition. It's a recreation of Usopp's ridiculous reaction face when he ate the Tabasco ball and went nuts for it. And I love that he doesn't even care that he won't get recognition from Luffy for this insane feat to save his life. This is easily, again, like I said, Usopp's best moment in the series. And honestly, like, even I can argue, there may be some other ones, but if this is, I don't have any arguments with it. Like, oh my God, this was insanely hype. And everyone at the time collectively went nuts over it too. Not only that, but this also had the added benefit of also disabling the nutcrackers down below, allowing Robin and the others down on the third level to now solely focus on Gladius, which is a double whammy. I mean, Usopp is the MVP of Dressrosa. I mean, obviously, Luffy is the one that will ultimately defeat Doflamingo, but without Usopp, none of this is possible. Like, he is the MVP. Like, he really is God Usopp. And I think this is what Oda, why he felt so confident in making Usopp so unlikable earlier in the arc, because he knew that we'd all collectively forget and forgive because of these two big moments he had in store for Usopp coming down the pipeline. And I mean, seriously, this scene is just too freaking good. Like, Viola's reaction too is golden, because I seriously think that Viola here has started to thirst for Usopp a little bit. Like, move over, Sanji, because God Usopp may have just stolen your girl. Everyone else's reaction is awesome too, because they are absolutely floored that Usopp was able to land that impossible shot. But with that, Luffy and Law have finally reached Doflamingo at the palace. And one thing I liked more about this moment in the manga that I wish they had kept exactly in the anime but didn't, because they wanted to elongate the pacing, is that in the anime they wait to have Luffy and Law kind of show us them rocketing up to Doflamingo. But in the manga, this happens off screen while Viola is reporting back to everyone what the situation is. And the panels show Viola and Usopp, but you don't get to see Luffy and Law during this. And in the manga, Viola says they reach the top floor of the palace, and then it cuts to Luffy and Law triumphantly standing there before Doflamingo and Treble. And it just flows so much better without those extra scenes, and it's so epic how the dialogue from Viola syncs up so well with the reveal of Luffy and Law standing there just staring down Doflamingo and Treble. It's such a great 2-page spread. Like, it's so awesome. But they kind of ruin it in the anime. I mean, it still works, but it's just really long and drawn out. It just doesn't quite land as hard as it did in the manga, in my opinion. Now, to kind of awkwardly rewind, there is another scene completely unrelated to these sort of plot lines. And yeah, we get a little bit more of Fujitora and Sabo earlier on as we see these two titans go at it some more. And I just wanted to see more of Fujitora because he's awesome and also has a very unique devil fruit power that I don't even fully understand what its capabilities are in the One Piece world. Like, the ability to control gravity is an extremely powerful ability in general, but in what direction Oda would take it is always kind of a question, as we just don't get enough of Fujitora. There are powers that if they worked like you think they should, would be instantly overpowered to the point of absurdity. One of those comes to mind is like Kizaru's Pika Pika fruit or Whitebeard's Gura Gura fruit. Those, of course, have been toned down a bit so that it can still work in manga without being like ridiculous. And I imagine the Zushi powers would also be used in a way that would tone them down a bit. But Oda also has the built-in excuse that Fujitora is going nowhere near his full strength, as he's not really into beating anyone, and he just wants to keep the appearance that he's trying to do something while stalling. And it's confusing Sabo and us, the viewer, because it's hard to get a read on what he's actually trying to accomplish. Regardless, Fujitora is incredibly strong, even when he's kind of holding back. And one thing that would make Fujitora insanely hard to fight is that he's yet to utilize, he doesn't remove the gravity around his opponents. He only increases it. If there's no gravity, you're kind of just helpless unless you had some way to propel yourself. but he can just counter that by exerting counter gravity just to keep you suspended. And people like Luffy could stretch to get out of it, or I'm assuming Logia users could become sort of their ethereal forms and just go completely elemental and avoid that potentially. And yeah, it's still unclear how the gravity affects certain Logia users. Like I imagine like Kuzan would have a hard time. Like ice is still affected by gravity, but things like smoke, maybe, smokers, Moku Moku powers, they may be a little bit less susceptible to gravity. But yeah, there's just a lot of potentially creative ways to explore this power that we've yet to see. So I think the main takeaway from this is I just want to see Fujitora like go all out, and we have yet to see that. But I hope we do get to see more of that later on. Anyways, in closing, the main event is about to begin, and Luffy and Law have finally reached Doflamingo again. But this time, they are ready to take him on, with Law now back in the fight. And it'll be crazy to see how a tag team of Law and Luffy would work versus Doflamingo and Treble. And yeah, I can't wait to see that play out, and hopefully we will get more into that on the next podcast. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes and to see pictures of my manga collection and card collection. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. No spoiler sections today, but stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye!